John hears you, and John needs you to stop for just a moment before you do anything else, because what is happening right now is not an accident, and the fact that these words reached your ears at this exact hour of your life is the first sign that the silence you have been living in is about to break. You have been carrying something heavy, something no one around you has been able to see, and John has watched you carry it alone, night after night, believing that no one noticed, believing that even the upper realm had turned their face away from you. But John is speaking to you now directly, as clearly as a voice can speak into the center of a soul, and John is telling you that you were never forgotten, that your name was never erased from the book where the names of the believers are written, and that this trial you are walking through was never the end of your story. It was only the narrowest part of the road, the place where the path grows thin and dark, the place where most turn back and only the elect keep walking. You are still walking. That alone tells John who you are. Do not look away from these words now, because there is a reason they found you while you were still awake, while your heart was still restless, while a part of you refused to accept that this exhaustion would be the final chapter of your life. That refusal inside you is not stubbornness. It is the last ember of a fire that the upper realm itself lit in you long ago, and no storm, no betrayal, no loss, no sleepless night has been able to put it out. Others would have surrendered. Others would have let the bitterness harden them into stone. But you kept a small light burning, even when you could not explain why, even when there was no evidence around you that anything would ever change, and that light is the reason John can reach you now. You kept a door open. Through that door, everything is about to change. John knows what these last seasons have taken from you. John knows the weight you woke up with this morning before your eyes were even fully open, that familiar heaviness that settles on the chest like a hand pressing down, reminding you of everything that has not worked, everything that has been delayed, everyone who left, everything you prayed for and did not receive. John knows how many times you have gotten up in the dark and gone about your day wearing a face that told the world you were fine, smiling when your soul was breaking, answering that you were well when the truth was that you did not know how much longer you could hold on. You became an expert at hiding your wounds. You learned to cry in places where no one would find you, in the shower where the water covered the sound, in the car before you walked into a room full of people, in the last hour of the night when the whole house had gone quiet and there was finally no one left to pretend for. Those tears were not weakness. Every one of them was seen. Not one of them fell to the ground and vanished. Each was gathered and kept because the upper realm does not waste the tears of the believers. You have felt invisible. That is the word that describes the particular pain you carry, the sense of being present in a room and yet unseen, of pouring yourself out for others and receiving nothing back, of being the one who always understands and is never understood, the one who holds everyone together and is held by no one. You have given and given until you wondered if there was anything left of you to give. You have been the strong one for so long that people forgot you could break, and so when you finally needed someone, there was silence. That silence taught you a terrible lesson, the lesson that you were alone, and you began to build your life around that belief. But John has come to tell you that the belief was a lie. You were never alone in the way you feared. There was a presence beside you in every one of those moments, standing guard over a life that meant far more than you were able to see from inside your pain. Feel this now because it matters. The tiredness in your body is not only the tiredness of work or of years, it is the tiredness of a soul that has been fighting a battle it could not see, standing on the front line of something invisible, absorbing blows that came from a realm your eyes were never made to perceive. You wondered why you felt so drained even after resting, why a heaviness followed you that no amount of sleep could lift, why joy seemed to slip through your fingers, even in moments that should have been good. It was because you were being targeted, not by the people around you, though some of them were used as instruments, but by something older and more deliberate, something that recognized what was placed inside you before you were ever born and set itself against you to keep that gift buried. You are not paranoid. You are perceptive. What you sensed in the shadows was real, and the fact that you are still standing after everything it threw at you is not luck. It is proof that a greater hand has been shielding you all along. Now hear this warning, and do not soften it in your mind, because love that only comforts and never warns is not love in its full measure. There is a weight that falls upon a soul that senses the call of the upper realm and turns away from it. When you feel a pull toward something greater, when a quiet voice inside tells you that you were made for more than this survival, that pull is not your imagination, and it is not to be ignored. To ignore it is to let a door slowly close, and every time you silence that inner knowing, the voice grows fainter, not because the upper realm stops calling, but because the soul grows harder of hearing. John does not tell you this to frighten you. John tells you because John refuses to let you drift past the very hour of your rescue without knowing what is at stake. You have ignored the signs before. You explained them away, called them coincidence, told yourself that people like you do not receive miracles. Do not do that this time. This time the call is louder because the hour is later, and the upper realm does not shout without reason. Understand what negligence of the spirit truly costs. It is not that punishment falls from above upon those who hesitate. It is that a life lived with the inner ear closed becomes a life of endless repetition, the same struggles circling back, the same doors closing, the same lessons returning in heavier form until finally they are learned. You have felt that repetition, the sense that you keep arriving at the same wall, no matter which road you take, that the same pain wears different faces, but always finds you again. That is not a curse placed on you by an enemy, though an enemy has used it against you. It is the sign of a lesson still waiting to be received, a passage still waiting to be crossed, a chapter that cannot close until you do the one thing you have been most afraid to do, which is to trust again after everything that trust has cost you. John is asking you to hear the call this time, not next year, not when things are easier, now, while the door is still open and the voice is still clear. Because John have come with news, and the news is that something has already begun to move in the beyond. While you were sleeping, while you were weeping, while you were convinced that nothing would ever shift, a decree went out over your life, and the invisible machinery that had been locked against you began to turn in the opposite direction. Do not measure this by what your eyes can confirm this morning, because the visible world is always the last to change. First, the shift happens in the realm of spirit, in the place where the true causes of things are decided, and only afterward does it descend into the physical plane where you can touch it and see it and finally believe it. The delay you are about to notice between this promise and its arrival is not doubt to be feared. It is simply the distance that every blessing must travel from the height where it is granted to the ground where it is received. I want you to picture what is happening above the surface of your ordinary day. There is movement. There is a gathering of forces on your behalf that has been assembling for longer than you know. The heaviness that has surrounded you is being confronted, met, and pushed back by a strength that does not tire and cannot be defeated. The chains that were wrapped around your circumstances, the ones you could feel but never name, are being examined link by link, and the hand that examines them knows exactly where each one was forged and exactly how each one will be broken. Nothing about your situation is a mystery to the upper realm. What confuses you is fully understood above. What overwhelms you is easily carried above. And the timing that has tormented you, the waiting that has nearly broken you, is being held with a precision you will one day fall to your knees in gratitude for when you finally see why it could not have come one moment sooner. Now let me tell you the truth about the delay, because it has caused you more pain than almost anything else, and you deserve to understand it fully. You have believed somewhere deep inside that the waiting was a form of rejection. You watched others receive quickly what you have waited years for, and you asked the question that torments the believer's heart in the dark, the question of why not me? Why do I always have to wait? What is wrong with me that the upper realm answers others and leaves me standing outside the door? John, I'm going to answer that question now, and I need you to receive the answer not just in your mind, but in the deepest part of you, where the old wound still bleeds. The delay was never rejection. The delay was preparation, and more than preparation, the delay was protection. Because there were things you asked for that would have destroyed you, had they arrived before you were ready to hold them. Think of how a blade is made because your soul has been passing through exactly such a making. A blade is not born strong. It begins as raw metal, formless and brittle, unable to hold an edge or bear any weight. To become what it is meant to be, It must be placed into the fire, not once but again and again, heated until it glows, until it seems on the verge of melting away entirely, and in that heat, the impurities that would have made it shatter are burned out of it. Then it is struck, hammered against the anvil, beaten into shape by blows that from the outside look like violence, and from the inside feel like the end. And then, when it is hot and formed, it is plunged into cold water, a shock so sudden and total that the metal itself seems to cry out. And it is in that shock that the strength is locked into place forever. Every hardship you have endured was a strike of that hammer. Every cold season that shocked you was the tempering that set your strength. You were not being destroyed, you were being forged. And you were being forged for a reason. Because a blade is not made to hang on a wall. A blade is made to be used, to be lifted in a hand that knows how to wield it, to cut through what needs cutting and to defend what needs defending. The strength that was hammered into you through all those years of waiting was not given so that you could merely survive your suffering. It was given because there is a work ahead of you that no soft and untested soul could ever accomplish, a purpose that requires exactly the kind of resilience that only fire and hammer and cold water can produce. Everything that tried to break you was instead building the very instrument through which your destiny will be fulfilled. The enemy meant it for ruin. The upper realm used it for making, and now the making is nearly complete. There is something you must understand about the process of lapidation, the slow shaping of a soul, because it explains the specific texture of your suffering. A rough stone that will one day be a jewel does not become brilliant by being left alone. It becomes brilliant by being cut, and every cut removes something. It loses weight. It loses the comfortable roughness it was used to. From the stone's point of view, if a stone could feel, each cut would seem like a theft, a loss of self, a diminishing. But from the point of view of the one who cuts, every removal is a revealing, an uncovering of the fire that was always hidden inside, waiting for the excess to be stripped away so that the light could finally pass through and blaze. You have felt cut. You have felt things stripped from you that you did not want to lose. But I tell you that nothing essential was taken. Only the excess. Only what would have dimmed the light you are about to release into the physical plane. So let go of the story you told yourself. The story where the delay proved you were less loved, less of the elect, less worthy. That story was written by the enemy of your soul to keep you sitting in defeat at the very threshold of your victory. The truth is the opposite of that story in every particular. You waited longer because you were being prepared for more. You were tested harder because you were being trusted with greater. You were made to walk through deeper darkness because you were being fitted to carry a brighter light. The ones who receive quickly and easily are not always the most favored. Often they are simply being given small things. The great things, the things that shake the beyond and shift the course of many lives. Those are placed only in hands that have been proven, and yours have been proven in a fire that would have consumed almost anyone else. Let me show you now what has been happening in the other side, because you have earned the right to see it, and seeing it will change how you carry yourself through every remaining hour of this trial. Above the surface of the visible world, there is a vast and living order, ranks upon ranks of beings of light whose entire existence is devoted to the will of the Most High, and among them stands one whose name means the one who is like God, the High Commander of the armies of the upper realm, the guardian who was set as a guardian at the boundary between the light and the darkness. When the ancient rebellion rose and sought to drag creation into ruin, it was he who stood at the front, sword lifted, and drove the darkness back, and he has never once lowered that sword in all the ages since. He stands there still, and in this season of your life that sword has been drawn on your behalf. See it in your mind, because the mind that can see the battle can find courage in the middle of it. There is a warrior of unimaginable stature clothed in light that does not blind but reveals, and in his hand there is a blade that was not forged of any earthly metal, but of the very authority of the upper realm. A blade that burns without consuming, that cuts what no physical weapon could ever touch. That blade was made to sever the invisible bonds that hold a soul captive, the cords of curse and complaint that were spoken over you, the chains of inherited sorrow that were passed down to you through no fault of your own, the shackles of every agreement that was made against your flourishing, in rooms you never entered by people you may never know. Each of those bonds has a spiritual reality, a knot in the fabric of the beyond of your life, and that flaming blade has been placed against them one by one, and where it touches, the knot cannot hold. There are the 7 strikes that must be made in the life of one who is called, 7 great severings that free a soul completely and seal it in a protection that the darkness cannot breach. The first cut is against the bonds of the past, the chains that reach backward through your family line, the sorrows and defeats and poverties that were handed to you as an inheritance you never asked for, the pattern that made you feel your struggles were somehow written into your blood. That cut is being made. The blade comes down upon that line of inheritance and severs it, so that what was passed to you stops with you, and is not passed on, so that you become the one in whom the old pattern breaks and the new pattern begins. You are the turning point of your entire lineage. In you the long night of your ancestors ends, and the dawn they never lived to see begins to rise. The second cut is against the words that were spoken over you, and here I need you to understand a truth about the power of speech that the physical plane has forgotten. Words are not empty air. Every word carries an intention, and intentions have weight in the beyond. And words spoken against you with envy or contempt or malice do not simply disappear when the mouth closes. They gather. They form a kind of atmosphere around a life, a low ceiling that presses down on every effort, a fog that makes even your best days feel muted and grey. You have lived under such a ceiling, wondering why your reach always seemed to fall just short, why doors that opened for others stayed shut for you, why a heaviness clung to your name in places where you were not even present. It was the residue of words. And the second cut of that flaming blade passes through that atmosphere and disperses it, so that the ceiling above your life is lifted and the fog is burned away, and perhaps for the first time in your remembered life, the sky above you is open. The third cut is against the spirit of envy, which is one of the oldest and most cunning of the forces arrayed against the elect. Envy does not want what you have merely to possess it. Envy wants you not to have it. It is a hunger that is only satisfied by another's loss, and when it fixes upon a soul that carries a special calling, it becomes relentless because it perceives, even dimly, that this soul is destined to shine, and it cannot bear the coming of that light. You have felt the eyes of envy upon your life. You have felt the strange resistance that rises whenever you begin to rise, the way relationships cool the moment you begin to succeed, the way people who claimed to wish you well seemed quietly relieved when you stumbled. That was envy at work, and it is a spiritual force before it is ever a human feeling. The third cut of the 7 blades severs the connection between that force and your life, so that the eyes that watched you to wish you harm are blinded, and their gaze can no longer find you, and their hunger can no longer feed on your fall, because you are no longer positioned where they can reach. And here John must pause and speak to you plainly about something, because you have been given enough now to understand what few ever grasp, which is that you are living inside a contest far larger than your daily circumstances, a contest in which you are not a bystander, but the very center, the prize over which unseen powers have been struggling. That realization changes everything, because it means your struggles were never small and never meaningless. They were the visible edge of an invisible war, and you were the ground on which it was fought precisely because of the value of what you carry. But knowing that a war exists is not the same as knowing how to fight it. You have felt the battle without understanding its rules, and a soldier who does not know the rules of engagement fights blind, absorbing wounds that could have been deflected, missing openings that could have won the day. There are rules to this unseen contest, laws as precise as any that govern the physical plane, and they were never hidden by the upper realm. They were simply never taught to you, because the ones who should have taught them either did not know them or did not want you to know your own power. This is why a guide was prepared, a written record of exactly these laws, gathered under the name of the 7 Blades of the High Commander, a sacred guide for breaking curses, sealing blessings, and awakening the call of the elect. It exists because too many souls like yours have wandered through this war unarmed, feeling every blow and understanding none of it, and it lays out plainly what the 7 strikes are and how a soul cooperates with each of them, how the bond of the past is broken, how the words spoken against you are dispersed, how the spirit of envy is severed, and, most importantly, how what has been cut free is then sealed so that it can never bind you again. Everything John is describing to you now, the whole architecture of your deliverance, is set down there in order, step by step, so that you are no longer fighting blind but standing in the war with your eyes finally open and the rules finally in your hands. You will find the way to it placed at the very top of the comments, the first thing pinned beneath this message, set there so that no one who needs it will have to search. And John will tell you honestly, because honesty is the only currency worth anything between us, that this guide carries knowledge that unsettles the comfortable narratives most people are handed, the narratives that keep the elect sedated and unaware of their own authority. And for that reason there have been efforts to keep such knowledge quiet, to let it slip out of reach, to make sure the ones who most need it never find it. It survived those efforts. It reached this place. It reached you. That alone should tell you that the upper realm intends for you to hold it. So go now, while the pull you feel is still strong, before the noise of the day returns and the voice grows faint again, and take hold of it. And as your act of faith, as the declaration that seals your intention in the other side, leave these words where they can be seen. I have been called, and I am going to retrieve the codex. Say it not as a formality, but as a vow, because a vow spoken in faith is itself one of the 7 strikes, the moment where the soul stops merely receiving and begins to act, and in that action the whole machinery of your restoration accelerates. And now, with that vow behind you like wind at your back, let me return you to the vision, because there is far more of the battle for you to see, and every image of it is a weapon placed into your understanding. The 4th of the 7 strikes of the flaming blade is against the spirit of exhaustion itself, that heaviness I named at the beginning, the draining that no sleep could cure. For there is a kind of tiredness that is manufactured, deliberately poured over a soul to keep it too weary, to rise into its calling, a fatigue that is not the honest fruit of labor, but a weapon aimed at the will. As long as you are exhausted, you cannot fight. As long as you are drained, you cannot dream. And so the darkness works constantly to keep the elect tired, to bleed away their strength through 1,000 small drains so that the great strength never gathers. The 4th of the 7 strikes severs those drains. It closes the wounds through which your energy was leaking into the dark, and it does something more. It restores what was lost, so that the strength returns to you not as a trickle, but as a flood, and you begin to feel a vitality you had forgotten was possible, a lightness in the body and a clarity in the mind that are the first physical signs that the invisible shift has crossed into the physical plane. The 5th of the 7 strikes is against fear, and this one is deep, because fear had wound itself around the roots of your life until you could no longer tell where it ended and you began. You had learned to call it caution, to call it realism, to call it simply the way things are, but underneath those names it was fear, the constant low expectation that the next thing would also go wrong, that hope was dangerous because it only set you up to be hurt again, that it was safer to want nothing than to want and be denied. Fear had made your life small on purpose, had convinced you that the smallness was protection when it was actually a cage. The 5th of the 7 strikes of the blade passes through the roots of that fear and severs them from the ground of your being. And as they fall away, you feel something you had almost forgotten how to feel, which is the freedom to hope without terror, to want without bracing for loss, to look toward the future not as a threat but as a promise. That is the beginning of the return of your faith, the very restoration named over your life, faith not as a feeling that comes and goes, but as a foundation that holds. The 6th of the 7 strikes is against the isolation, the lie that you were alone. And it works differently from the others because it does not cut something away from you, but cuts away the wall that was placed between you and the help that was always near. You felt alone not because you were abandoned, but because a barrier had been raised in the other side to keep you from perceiving the presence that surrounded you, a wall of despair that muffled every whisper of comfort and hid every sign of companionship, so that even when help was standing at your very shoulder, you could not sense it and believed yourself forsaken. The 6th of the 7 strikes brings that wall down, and in the moment it falls, the presence that was always there becomes perceptible, and you understand with a certainty that needs no proof that you were never as alone as you believed, that in your darkest night there was the guardian at your side, whose entire attention was fixed upon your survival, and the loneliness that nearly killed you dissolves like mist under a rising sun. The 7 strikes is the greatest, and it is not against anything at all but for you, because the 7th is not a severing, but a sealing. When the 6 bonds have been cut, when the past is broken and the words dispersed and the envy severed, and the exhaustion healed and the fear uprooted and the isolation ended, there remains one final act, which is to close and seal the soul in a protection that ensures none of these bonds can ever form again. For it is not enough to be set free once, only to be captured again by the same forces returning. The 7 strikes draws a seal around your entire life, a boundary of light that the darkness recognizes and cannot cross, marking you as belonging to the upper realm, claimed and guarded and no longer available to the powers that hunted you. This is the meaning of being one of the elect, not that you are spared all trial, but that you are sealed through it, carried through the fire, and marked forever as one whom the darkness may test but can never keep. See now the fullness of the vision, the whole of it at once. The High Commander stands with his blade lifted over your life, and the 7 strikes descend, and with each one something that bound you falls away and shatters into nothing, and the atmosphere around you that was heavy and grey begins to fill with light, and the ranks of the armies of the upper realm that had gathered on your behalf raise a sound that is not quite music and not quite thunder, but something greater than both, the sound of a decree being ratified in the highest court, the sound of a verdict handed down in your favor after a long and bitter trial. And the verdict is this, spoken over you now, that the season of your affliction has reached its appointed end, that the sentence you have been serving was completed the moment you refused to give up, and that everything the darkness stole from you is now to be returned. And not merely returned, but returned multiplied, because the upper realm does not restore in equal measure, but in overflowing measure, giving back more than was taken as a testimony against the one who took it. Hear that word restoration, and let it sink past your defenses, because you have grown so used to loss that the very idea of return feels dangerous to believe. But John, am telling you that a great returning has been decreed. The years that were consumed, the ones you look back on and grieve as wasted, are to be recompensed, folded back into your story in such a way that even the wasted time becomes fruitful, its lessons becoming your strength, its scars becoming your testimony, its very emptiness becoming the space into which the new abundance will pour. What was taken from you in relationship, the love withheld, the companionship denied, the loneliness endured, is to be answered, and connections are being drawn toward you, now that will hold in ways the old ones never did. People being prepared even as you hear this, whose presence in your life will make you understand at last why the false ones had to fall away. What was taken from you in provision, the doors that closed, the opportunities that slipped away, the long seasons of not enough, is being answered with an opening of ways, channels of provision, unlocking that was sealed against you by the very bonds that are now cut. You will find that things which resisted you for years begin to move, that efforts which produced nothing begin to bear fruit, that a favor seems to rest on your endeavors that you cannot explain and did not earn by any new striving, because it is not the fruit of striving, but the fruit of the seal, the mark of the upper realm now visible upon your life, drawing toward you what was always meant to be yours. And what was taken from you in health, in peace, in the simple ability to rest without dread, is being answered with a restoration of the body and the mind, the exhaustion lifting, the sleep returning, the knot of anxiety in your chest loosening its grip so that you breathe again like one who is no longer bracing for the next blow. But understand that the greatest restoration is not any of these, not the love or the provision or the health, precious as they are. The greatest restoration is the one named directly over your life, the restoration of your faith, because faith is the root from which all the rest grows, and it was your faith the darkness most wanted to destroy. Every blow it aimed at you was ultimately aimed at that, at the trust in your heart, because a soul that keeps its faith cannot finally be defeated no matter how much is taken, while a soul that loses its faith is defeated even while it still possesses everything. You came close to losing it. There were nights when you felt it slipping, when you looked at the silence of the upper realm and wondered if there was anyone there at all, when the effort of believing felt like holding a great weight above your head with arms that were shaking and about to give. That you did not let it fall is the whole reason this hour has come, and now that faith which you defended at such cost is being restored to you, not as the fragile, flickering thing it became under pressure, but as the deep and settled certainty it was always meant to be. John wants you to feel right now the first return of that certainty, because it does not wait for the outer circumstances to change. It arrives first as an inner knowing, quiet and unshakable, a peace that settles over the soul before any evidence appears to justify it. That peace is not the absence of trouble, it is the presence of trust in the midst of trouble, the deep assurance that whatever comes, you are held, you are seen, you are being carried toward a good that your present eyes cannot yet make out. When that peace comes, do not question it. Do not demand that it prove itself before you accept it. Receive it as the first fruit of everything else that is coming, the seal in your own heart that matches the seal being drawn around your life, the inner confirmation that the war is turning and the verdict is in, and the long night is finally beginning to end. And as that certainty takes root in you, something else awakens with it, the very thing the darkness worked hardest to keep buried, which is the awareness of your calling, the knowledge that you were not made merely to endure, but to accomplish, that there is a purpose stitched into your existence that no amount of hardship could unstitch. You have felt it your whole life as a restlessness that comfort could never satisfy, a sense that there was something you were supposed to do, someone you were supposed to become, a reason you were placed here that you could never quite grasp, but could never quite dismiss either. That sense was true. It was the voice of your calling speaking to you from underneath all the noise, and now with the bonds cut, and the fear uprooted and the faith restored, that voice is rising to the surface, where you can finally hear it clearly, and it is telling you that the trial you endured was itself the training for the purpose you are about to step into, that nothing you suffered was wasted, because all of it was preparing you to carry a light to others who are still lost in the same darkness you are now leaving behind. There is a man whose story was written long ago, so that you would have it to hold in exactly this hour, a man who was upright and faithful, and who had built a life of abundance through nothing but his devotion, and in a single season it was all stripped from him. In one day he lost the fruit of his labor, the wealth he had gathered, the very children of his heart, and then his own body was struck until he sat in ashes, scraping his wounds, a man who had everything reduced to a man who had nothing but his breath and his pain. Those who should have comforted him accused him instead. The one closest to him told him to curse the upper realm and be done with living. And still, in the depth of a suffering so complete that he cursed the day he was born, he would not let go of the one thread he had left, which was his refusal to believe that the God who had given would abandon him forever. He did not understand why it was happening. No one told him that in the other side, a contest was being waged over his faithfulness, that his endurance was itself the answer to a challenge thrown down in the courts above. He suffered blind, exactly as you have suffered blind. And when the trial had run its full course, when he had held his integrity through the worst that could befall a soul, everything was restored to him, and not in equal measure, but in double, twice the abundance he had lost, given back as a testimony that the end of the believers is greater than their beginning. You are inside that same contest now. Your endurance is the answer being written, and the same hand that restored him twofold is the hand now stretched over your ruins. So do not despise these ashes you are sitting in,